Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Joanna Danielle. So I'm usually here on a Tuesday at this time, and I'm usually interviewing someone. But today I'm not interviewing, I don't have a guest. We usually have trauma recovery conversations. Today I'm here alone because I want to talk to you about some things that you can do. Hey, Lejem. I just saw your video. Some things that you can do to widen your window of tolerance and how to develop effective coping mechanisms, basically, and how to successfully thrive despite what's happening. So I'm going to talk to you about some trauma stabilization, things that you can do to help yourself when you're triggered and how you can widen your window of tolerance. Now, before I even tell you what your window of tolerance is and what the things that you can do to kind of stabilize yourself when you're triggered, is just that one of the things that sometimes we do is we want validation for what has happened. We want validation for our pain. We want people to understand. We want people to say, yes, it happened. We want people to agree that it was terrible what happened. And we want all of that. And some of us are, desire more empathy. I said desire, but some of us maybe require, I say, more empathy than others. And that usually happens. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming on. And that usually happens because we're not giving ourselves that validation. We are not on our own validating our pain. We're not on our own saying, yes, this happened to me. Yes, it was wrong. Yes, it was horrible. And yes, these are the impact. These are the effects of it. And until you do that, right, and you're looking externally for validation and externally for support of your pain, it's going to be a really difficult journey. Healing takes time. Healing is not straightforward. It's up and down and jagged because life happens. And when we're on this journey and is doing what we're doing to just survive day to day, to just manage day to day, when we've experienced trauma, depending on the age that it happened and all of those kind of things, and our home and the circumstances that we live in, and strong resourcing, empathetic, solid support system, we have those things in our lives. Sometimes the impact of the trauma might be less than other times for people who don't have that support system, right? And I wonder sometimes where we learn this as humans. So I was talking to the children earlier, and the twins are working on a project for their birthday, which is in September. And we were talking about coping mechanism, and my son said, have a good, strong support system. And he said some other things, but then he said, shut down. And I didn't hear anything past that, because I'm like, no, we don't want to shut down. Why would you do that? Why? Tell me about that. Tell me some more about that. And so that's why I want to talk about coping mechanism, because shutting down is not a viable option, right? Because it might seem to work for a time. It might make you look and seem like you're in control, but you are not, because your body is going to give way. Because when we experience pain and trauma, whatever the level, whatever the type, if it's one adverse childhood experience or you experience 10, it's the same. Your body also has been impacted. So it's not a psychological thing only, it's physiological. So, and I believe that the people who shut down have a harder struggle and challenge to manage, because there's so much that's going on in your body, and your nervous system can't hold it up for long, right? So there's going to come a time when the disease, the illnesses, the physical illnesses are starting to manifest themselves. And there's some of it that won't show up in the blood tests. So if you use shutdown as a coping mechanism, I want to encourage you to learn really good ways of coping. And denying of the pain is not one of the ways of coping. So first, as I talk through widening the window of tolerance and some of the coping mechanisms that you can use to do that, one of the first place is to accept, I am hurt. This is what's happening with me right now, because that's the place that you move on from, right? So there's no denying the pain, otherwise you won't be coping. So you might go to the gym and you might exercise. And exercise is an amazing tool to use to cope and widen the window of tolerance. But if you're exercising while you're trying to repress memories, then you're still putting your nervous system under pressure. And while it will help, it really works better if you try to find somewhere to talk through the memories that you're trying to repress, to talk to someone about the flashbacks and the nightmares, to talk to somebody about how different circumstances and situations make you triggered. You can find trusted people to have those conversations with, or it's trusted spaces where you can have those conversations. Okay, so what's the window of tolerance? As I'm talking about, it's a way that neuroscience gave us to think about how we function at our optimum, how we function in various roles, and how we manage when emotions are heightened, when they begin to have a negative impact. So that's what the window is, right? So we have a space in which we have the trigger and the automatic response, and the tolerance is what happens in here. So some people don't have any, and trauma shrink our window, right? And so what we want to do is to learn what to do to create some space and to open wide the space so that we're able to cope, we're able to manage. And when situations happen, we can function in our day-to-day life, we can make decisions, and we can manage emotions, right? So I use this one a lot. I use it for myself. I use this in my survivors of sexual abuse group, shared it with them, and everybody really loved it and is leaning hard into using it. And that's really helpful. So there are various deep breathing exercises that you can do. And in my bio, you will see there's a free offer for the trauma stabilization PDF. But I think the workbook is also in the bio, but the PDF certainly is. So there's a sheet of, I think, 4 or 5 coping mechanisms, breathing exercises that you can do that are designed to help you when you're triggered, to manage what's going on in your body and to give yourself back access to your frontal lobe so you can function optimally in your everyday life, right? And you can manage, and because sometimes when we're triggered, some people, the triggers are really, really potent, they're really bad, and it can shut you down and you can't function for days. Some people can't function for days. So we don't want that. We want you to be able to manage day-to-day life, despite what's happening. Okay, so here is the exercise. So first, it's lean on anything that's solid and stern and stable, right? And when I teach this, I said if you're with a partner and it's safe, you can use them. If you're triggered and you're safe enough to talk to them about what if one person can't identify their triggers? I think that's such a really good question. And it's a good question because when we started our survivors group in January, and one of the first sessions I was doing was on triggers and how to manage. And there were 2 women in there that really struggled because they said, well, we don't know what our triggers are. We're not triggered. And I know that everybody is. It's just what's mine. So it's not a neat thing. So I'm going to tell you what the triggers are before I go in. So what if you can't identify your triggers? So you might not be able to identify triggers cognitively, meaning you won't be able to have a sense like, okay, so this is what happens from A to B to C. But if you understand your body and you're working with your body and you're learning how to listen and just pay attention to yourself, you might be able to feel shifts in your heart rate. You might be able to feel what your shoulders feel like, where in your body you carry stress, and the situations that cause you to feel what you feel in your body. You might be able to tell when your brain becomes foggy and fuzzy and you can't think. You might be able to tell when your palms are sweaty or the tummy's wobbly. You might be able to tell those physical things that you didn't know were connected to triggers before, right? So I would say, where in your body do you feel stress? When certain things happen, what happened for you in your body? And so that's a really good way of noticing what's going on. And so I'd say just over time, for those who are watching and even on the replay, and you're thinking, well, I don't know what my triggers are. Do I have any? We all do. So just notice for yourself how you function in different settings. You know, we can walk in a room and we can immediately sense that there's something in this room. Like there's an energy shift. Everybody's upset in this room. There's tension here, or there's laughter and happiness and lightness. Everybody's laughing and everybody's relaxed. Or we experience different emotional states depending on the environment that we're in. So that's a really good sign to tell you, indicator of something that is triggering. So that room might not be triggering, but use it as a gauge to tell you other situations. So for example, I'm afraid of dogs, small, large, medium, in between, just any kind, right? So, and I know that because I was bitten intentionally when a cousin let the dog chase me, bit me, and I was young. The memory stayed. I'm terrified, regardless of how small and cute. It takes me a while to warm up to them enough to say, to touch them, or to even allow them to come near me and to be comforted by me. I have to calm myself and talk to myself and let myself know that it's okay. They're not going to hurt you. It's really cute. It just wants to play. Just rub the hair, just allow yourself to do that. But I have to calm myself down. Now that might take a couple seconds. It doesn't take long because I'm so used to doing it and to widening my window that I know that that's a trigger. Now, there are people who don't know that that's a trigger for them. And so they don't know that their response is a trigger. So the dog comes, they see the dog, they run, or they become tense, or they become irritable, or they cry, or they become frightened, and they don't know that that's a trigger. It's because they're triggered, right? So another way to know if you're triggered or what that is when we're in the emotional brain, and there's certain things that are common. We feel frustrated, upset, angry, sad, cry, whining, moaning. Those kind of emotions happen. We're in those kind of emotional states. And again, when we're intelligent to our emotions, then it will help us to understand the things that shifts us, right? So that's a trigger. Here's another trigger. So if you're married, your husband might trigger you in different ways. Now, he might not mean to, you might not want it to, but it does. So what are the things that annoy you? Sometimes we say, oh, I'm so annoyed, or so why are you annoyed? That might be a trigger. You might be annoyed because you're organized, he isn't. And when he does certain things, it annoys you. So you're triggered, right? So I hope that's clear. And there's so many other ways that we could explain it, but I hope that's clear. Let me know if that's clear. So what's the exercise to widen your window of tolerance? So I'm going to use my phone case as an example. Thank you for those hearts. I see that you're understanding. And when we're triggered, we feel destabilized. That means our world is shaking a little bit. It feels unstable. That's great. Thank you. Our world is shaking a little bit. We feel unstable, and we want something solid to hold on to. We want the world to stop spinning. Sometimes the world feels like it's spinning too fast. Sometimes it's spinning slow, but it's spinning, and we want it to stop spinning. When we know what to do, we want it to stop. So our window is not wide when we're using coping mechanism that's I'm going to say unhealthy for want of a better word, right? So I don't judge people for their coping mechanisms, because I believe that our coping mechanisms keep us alive, they keep us well, they keep us here, and I'm happy for that. I'm happy that you're here, right? And I want you to know that whatever coping mechanism that you're using, we can replace it and receive health and learn healthier healthier ways to cope. But I just want you to know that. So you might go on your phone and scroll a lot. That's a coping mechanism now, because it shuts the frontal lobe down. It gives us it shuts everything off. You don't have to think, you don't have to feel, as long as you're scrolling and laughing at reels. That's it. You scroll for hours on Instagram and TikTok and wherever you scroll. You know how they draw you in. You can stay there for hours. Or you might watch television. You might be on YouTube for hours, Netflix for hours. Those things are coping mechanisms too. When somebody can be there and just shut everything off for many hours, that's a coping strategy. And it's not a healthy one. We want to learn some healthier ways to cope, right? Food. People want food, certain kinds. And as I said, I don't judge people for their coping mechanisms, but I want you to know that it's maintaining something. It's helping you to cope with something. And we want to be able to understand what that something is, so that we can use different strategies to cope. That's going to serve you better long term. Some people use sex as a coping mechanism, and porn and overwork and alcohol and drugs. And there's a range of things that people use to cope. And it doesn't widen the window. It keeps it closed, right? Because the trigger, the automatic response, and we're avoiding the feeling. We're avoiding feeling. one of the fallouts of trauma is that we struggle with an ability to manage emotions, right? So that's understandable, right? But when we're shutting it down, and sometimes we shut it down for different reasons, because we're working, we have an important job, we have a family, we have to function, we're married, we don't want anybody to know, we don't want people to know that we're struggling, we don't want people to know that we've experienced this trauma, we are still in hiding from ourselves, and all of those things is a recipe for unhealthy coping strategies, right? But when we can face it with support, when we can sit with that difficult thing, and we can begin to work it through, then we know you're on your way to widening the window and gaining control of you and of your emotions, and not control in a way that it's shut down and barricaded, you're barricaded, but a control in a way that you understand it, you're not afraid of it, you can apply coping strategies to it. So back to that one. The solid foundation thing that you're going to lean on, right? So sometimes if you have a partner and they're safe and you're feeling triggered and you're safe to tell that to your partner, you can use them as a source of just like standing still, and you're leaning, because what you're doing is leaning into that support to stabilize your world, right? If that's not an option, and it's not always an option every time, it's really good if you're healing, if you have somebody who's safe that you can do that with. If not, I said find a solid wall in a space that is quiet and calm, where you can be on your own and just allow yourself to sink into it, and maybe just slide down to the end and sit, right? And allow yourself to sit there. Listen to music or practice deep breathing. In through your nose, out through your mouth, slowly and calmly. In through your nose, out through your mouth, slowly and calmly, and just allow yourself to focus on your breath. Focus on your breath, not anything else. And focus on just notice your joints, your muscles in your shoulders becoming more relaxed. And your tummy, the knots in your tummy that was causing butterflies becoming more relaxed. Just notice your chest not as tight. You can breathe a little bit easier, and just notice that, and stay there for as long as you need to. If you're not at work and you're not rushed, or there's no little person in the house that needs your attention and they're not safe on their own, stay there for as long as you need to, until your body feels calm again. I can tell you that once you're doing this for as many times as you need to, as many times in the day that you need to, over time, it becomes automatic that you just know that I feel destabilized. This is what I use to stable me. It might not work for everybody. So if it doesn't work for you, still use a strategy that works for you. Download the free PDF with about 4 or 5 different strategies, deep breathing exercises that you can use to cope, to stabilize yourself. They're all trauma stabilization techniques, right? If it works for you and you lean into this one, you might not need to use it. If it takes you 10 minutes the first time, the second time, the third, the 10th time, it might take you 6 minutes, 7 minutes, 5 minutes. And then you're doing it automatically, right? You're doing it automatically. Now you don't need to slide down. You might just lean on the wall for support. You might just hold on to the arm of your chair and ground and put your foot firmly on the floor, because you know that I'm just grounding myself in the present, because I'm triggered and I'm in my emotional brain. I'm in the past. And when I'm in the past, these are the thoughts that are coming. These are the things that are happening. So I'm just going to ground myself in the present and stay so I can hear what's happening in the room. That's another thing. When we're triggered, we're not able to hear what's going on around us. We can't hear the conversation. We're hearing noise. We know that people are talking. We know that they're sitting there, but we can't hear them. We can't take part of it. We can't listen. Nothing's going in, right? So if you're in a meeting and that's happening, if you're with a client, wherever you are and that's happening, you can still do it. You don't have to, you might not get to lean on a wall, but you can just allow your back to press into the chair. Put your arm on the chair, the armrest, if your chair has one. Ground your foot firmly on the ground and give yourself just permission to breathe slowly in and out, to get yourself back in the room so you can be present and you can hear what's happening. Okay? So that's one I want to share. And I think as the weeks go along, I'm interviewing somebody next week, but as the weeks go along, I'll come and I'll share some more trauma stabilization techniques that you can use, because I know that we're living in such a difficult time, and there's so many things happening in the world. We came out of a pandemic, went into war, and the world is in uproar. And we have to find ways of managing so that we can still live and experience joy, and we can still be okay in our bodies and our minds. All right, so that's my mission, to help us all be okay as we work together. Okay, so thank you all for coming on. Thank you for joining. Thank you for your comments. I don't see any more in the chat, but I really appreciate you, and I'll see you next. I'm here on Sunday again, but I'm also here next week Tuesday, so I hope you'll join me then. Take care. Bye.